religious thing and back into reality, we're clouded. Our judgment is completely clouded by belief systems that are enslaving us. Jesus was a very political figure, and so were his apostles. So political that the old Rome commandeered his message, turned it into a religion, and then suddenly converted the whole world to Christianity, and it was all political. The Roman Catholic Church is a nation. The Vatican has a seat at the United Nations Council. Okay? It's, you know, politics is the interaction between people. Polis means city. It's a Greek word for city. Politics is how people interact with each other. You know, we go into churches and we sit there and we listen to the guy talk, and then we go home and go back next week, and there's very little of any real interaction going on inside the church. They're kind of they've taken themselves into the realm of a non-factor in this equation. And it's the same thing that happened during the Bolshevik Revolution. It's the same thing that happened in Nazi Germany. The churches didn't speak out because they were afraid. The instrument that's supposed to be teaching the truth is afraid to speak the truth. Well, that's not what the early church, you know, they knew taking a position as a pastor in the early church was probably a death sentence. They were very political and very dangerous. The apostles were accused of turning the world upside down because they said there's another king, one named Jesus, and they troubled the town fathers. The town fathers at that time were both, because there was no church separation of church and state, they were very political. But our churches today, they're political within inside the church, but their involvement inside politics. And you know what? This should be being taught in the church. Banking and politics and government should be being taught from the pulpit. If it's not being taught from the public schools, then where are we going to learn it?
What do you think tax-exempt status is all about?
They sold out. They already had tax-exempt status. Churches were already tax-exempt. They didn't need to petition the government for tax-exempt status. Remember, the First Amendment says government shall make no law, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion.
The 16th Amendment.
So now the churches are persuaded by lawyers that they need to go ask for permission to exist from the government? No. No, the church belongs to the people. The institution of marriage belongs to the people. We've given it over to the government. Raising of children belongs to the people. We've given that over to the government. We have completely surrendered our freedoms to the government because we've given them power that they don't have. Remember, the only power that they have is life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, secure these rights. We've given them all this power because we haven't objected to it. We have not objected, and by not objecting, we've consented. Got about another hour. So what I want to do, I want to show you something. I just want to show and tell, okay? I'm going to tell you some stories. In 1995, I got pulled over, didn't have a driver's license plate, passport, and got charged with driving with a false or fictitious ID. My argument to the jury was that I had thrown off the government and that I had declared another king, Yeshua, Jesus the Christ, and that I was an ambassador. Yeah, I felt the first time I did this, one of the jurors went up to the judge and said, "You're letting this guy run around loose?" The judge told me that after the trial. I developed a rapport with the judges. They knew what I was doing. The judges got it. The judges got it. And I'm on a first name basis with the sheriff in Gunnison County. He gets it. They know what I'm up to. All right? They know what I'm doing. They know that it's about educating. It's about reaching into the system and you know, trying to get the creative juices flowing in and to be an example of courage while I was being scared to death. Because my knees were knocking and I was trembling and I thought, this has got to look foolish. My dad knew I would have gone off the deep end. But I have a ruling from the district court in Gunnison that found that I am, in fact, an ambassador of the kingdom of heaven. Those are the exact words that he made in his ruling. Because when I sued the state,
Here, here!
When I sued the state in my capacity as ambassador, I came in as an ambassador and countersued. They brought a traffic charge against me. I took it into the next highest court and filed for an injunction and declaratory judgment against the lower court. See, I know the tools. I'm learning the tools. I'm using the tools of their system. Petitioning for, and my argument was that according to the Constitution, the only court in the country that has jurisdiction over cases involving ambassadors is the United States Supreme Court. So I wanted to get a ruling that I was an ambassador, and I got it. But at the time, last week, let me show you, let me bring something a little bit closer to home. I'm telling you, I've tried a lot of things. Okay, on September 18th, last September 18th, just several weeks ago, I got pulled over. I'm driving down the road. I was going to go to the meeting up here about the state Northern Colorado secession.
Yeah,
I wasn't here because I got arrested that night. Well, let me tell you what happened. Okay, so here's the story. And this will have an effect in your life because you can do it too. So I'm driving down the road and the cop pulls me over and I said, "What?" He says, "Well, you have a blocked windshield." And that's not a blocked windshield. I had a little newspaper, hold it up in the news, right on the dashboard. He says, "You have a blocked windshield. I need to see your driver's license, proof of insurance." And I said, "No, that's not going to happen." He says, "Well, you have to. It's the law." And I said, "That's not an obstruction." He said, "Sir, it's the law. You have to show me some ID." And I said, "No, I don't. And I don't consent to this stop." Now, what do I know that you don't know right now? I know what an investigatory stop is. An investigatory stop is when the cop has reasonable suspicion that a crime has been, is being, or is about to be committed. When a cop has reasonable suspicion that a crime has been, is being, or is about to be committed, he has the right and the power to stop you and shake you down. ID, who are you? They have the right because you've committed a crime. But if you haven't committed a crime, they can't do that. And the Supreme Court is clear. Terry versus Ohio, and there's a lot of other cases that have come out of this case. You can't just be randomly shaken down by a cop. You can't be walking down the sidewalk and a cop comes up and demands to see your ID. You can't be driving down the road and a cop willy-nilly decides to pull you over because he wants to know who you are. Can't do it. Kevin, am I exaggerating? No. So the cop pulls me over and says, "You have a blocked windshield." I said, "That's not a blocked windshield." He said, "Well, sir, step out of the car." I said, "That's not happening either." He says, "You have to." And I said, "No, that's not a blocked windshield. I don't consent to this stop." What he should have done was gone back to his car and driven away. But he didn't. He came back up. Now, he doesn't know who I am because I haven't identified myself. I'm standing outside the Jeep now. I just threw the key in and locked the door and locked the back so he couldn't go search my vehicle because I know that if you get arrested, they have the right to search your vehicle as incident to the arrest. So knowing that, I locked the keys in the vehicle and I'm standing outside the car and he came up and said, "Sir, you're under arrest." He doesn't know who I am. What's his probable cause for the stop? What's his reasonable, articulable suspicion that a crime has occurred? He claimed that there was a newspaper. He claimed it was 1/3 of the windshield was being blocked and therefore I couldn't see out the front windshield. And I decided to challenge it. So I get arrested, I get thrown in the vehicle. No, that was an exaggeration. He set me in the, put me in the bracelets. I get put in the back of his car. He goes and tries to search the Jeep. He gets very upset because he can't search the Jeep. Comes back, "Where's the key?" And I said, "I don't consent to a search." So he takes me down and they try to book me in, and so they take me up and he says, "Now we need to book you in. We need to do your fingerprints." I said, "I don't consent to that either." "Well, we need to take your photograph." "I don't consent to anything that's happening here. I do not consent. This is an illegal arrest And now, you guys, this is an unlawful detention. I'm not cooperating with you. Well, they threw me in a cold cell, and I stayed there overnight. I got some good sleep. I was really tired. Woke up about 8 o'clock the next morning. The jail door opens, and I said, I demand a phone call. I haven't had my phone call yet. Slam. I'm in the holding cell, so new customers are coming in. Every time the jail door would open, I'm making a record. I want an administrative kite. If everybody needs to know what an administrative kite is, that's where you can fill out a demand. You can make a demand on the jail. And I immediately demanded jail policy manual. I want your jail policy manual. Nope, you can't have anything until you cooperate. I want a phone call. You can't have a phone call till you cooperate. I'm not cooperating. Well, you're not getting a phone call. Really? Okay. So, what do I know that they don't know? So finally, about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, they come in and they say, would you like to go in front of the judge? I said, is that voluntary or mandatory? They said, well, that's voluntary. I said, no, I don't want to go see the judge then. 5 minutes later, they came back in and said, okay, now you got to go see the judge. It's mandatory this time. All right, let's go. So I go in front of the judge, and the judge says, well, Mr. Justice, you've been charged with us and so, and we want to know how you plead. And I said, I don't consent to anything that's going on here. Just a second. I don't consent to anything that's going on here. I've been unlawfully detained, and now they won't even let me have a phone call to call a lawyer. So I don't consent to anything that's happening here. So the judge says, well, when you cooperate, you can get your phone call. Now the judge is involved. So I went back to the jail cell, reflected for a while. After being in jail for 23 hours, I decided to go ahead and bail out, and got out. So last Wednesday, I had a hearing on this motion that I'm here to show you. It's called a motion to suppress. This is how you use the Constitution. This is how you use the Fourth Amendment that says the right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects from unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be infringed. Okay, that is a constitutional limitation on their power. Is a constitutional restraint, shall not be infringed. So this is the Colorado Revised Statute here, CRS, Colorado Revised Statute, Title 16, Section 3, Chapter 3, Section 103. This is the authority that authorizes the police officers in Colorado to make stops. It's a statutory authority. Everything they do, you can trace to a statute. Everything they do, you can trace to a regulation and then trace it to a statute. Everything they do, you can trace it to a resolution which implements a regulation or a rule which traces it right back to the statute. Law is actually pretty easy if you know that everything they do is a creature of law. They're creatures of law, they're bound by law, they live and die by the law. Roger, you were going to say something a minute ago. What was it?
How did they know you were Mr. Justice?
They didn't. When they arrested, let's back up. When I got out of the car, I forgot to throw my wallet in the car. That was my mistake. So they found a check made out to me, and that was a link in the chain. Oh, by the way, I should say this. When the cop said, I need to see some ID, and I said, you know, the Fourth Amendment, says that I have the right to be secure in my person's, house's, papers, and effects from unreasonable searches and seizures. And I don't have to provide you with any information that might provide a link in the chain that would ultimately lead to conviction. And he said, what are you, a constitutionalist? And I said, now I'm exercising my right to remain silent. And he said, that right doesn't begin yet.
Oh, really?
So he didn't know who I was when he made the arrest. So at the moment of the arrest, what was he arresting me for?
Obstruction.
That's a traffic infraction.
Failure to obey.
Oh, contempt of cop. Yeah. Failure to obey. But I wasn't charged with failure to obey.
Really?
There is no failure
to get out of
to.
the car, I was thinking that probably what he would.
No, he didn't charge me with failure to obey. But I've taken that one on too. And that's a very narrow scope on that statute. But this statute authorizes them to make a stop if they have reasonable suspicion that a crime has been, is about to be committed. So, I'm arguing with him on the side of the road, which is probably not very wise, but I was in a mood, so I did. And this is my position. There was no legitimate safety concern because there was no objective reason for the officer to believe that the driver's view was obstructed, as there was no obstruction blocking his vision, and therefore the traffic stop was unreasonable and improper. This is the Colorado Supreme Court controlling authority. Now, when you read a Supreme Court case or any kind of case law, what that does is it governs the conduct of the court. Case law governs the conduct of the court. This is really important to understand. So, cases that end up on appeal are always there because somebody is arguing that the court made a mistake. That's how cases get appealed. Somebody made a mistake. This particular case went all the way to the Colorado Supreme Court. Similar circumstances mine is called an on-point case. This case is controlling. The circumstances of this case were very, very, very similar, almost identical to the circumstances in my case. So I cited this case as controlling over the court. Now the court is obligated to obey controlling law issued by the courts. So in this case, the court had no choice but to obey People versus Serta. And People versus Serta says that if the initial stop was improper, all subsequent detention and questioning of the driver of the vehicle is unwarranted. So I had a little bit of an advantage over this cop because he didn't know that I knew this. And I was picking a fight. The reason I was picking a fight is because I know this particular cop trolls up and down that highway doing this to a lot of people. They're shaking the people down for revenue. So they're looking for any reason they can to pull somebody over, but that stop is called a pretextual stop. They're really looking for something else. They're looking for driving under revocation, they're looking for drugs, they're looking for no insurance. They're looking for anything they can to make money for the state. That's their job. The Motor Vehicle Division is a division of the Department of Revenue. The Motor Vehicle Division is a division of the Department of Revenue. The Driver's License Division is a division of the Department of Revenue. The State Highway Patrol is enforcing revenue laws. So, this was my argument, this was my authority, and then I went down and I explained, and I made this motion a week after I was released from jail. I had a hearing, I came in and introduced this motion, and this is my position. The purported purpose of the initial investigation being pretextual, in the absence of any other basis for detention or questioning of me, Justice, Hilling's conduct in requiring me to produce identification lacked reasonable suspicion and was therefore unwarranted. In the absence of probable cause, I was under no obligation to identify myself. Again, this law here, 29 Federal Register, or Federal Reporter, I can't remember now. Third volume, 558. That's the volume number. That's the, you call it, edition. Third edition, excuse me, 558. Now, this here, 10th Circuit. Colorado is within the 10th Circuit of the federal circuits. There's, the state is divided, I can't recall, I think it's 11. I think there's 11. Don't quote me on that. But Colorado's in the 10th Circuit. So when I'm exercising, when I'm using the federal Constitution, I have to show federal law and how the federal law acts on fact circumstances relative to the provision of the Constitution that I'm invoking. And I was invoking the Fourth Amendment. The Fourth Amendment, as understood by the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals, and that's what that's citing, the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals has made this holding. As well as, this is a Colorado case So now I've got two authorities. I've got a federal authority and a state authority.